specifically a topic and thinking about the guests I have on today. My guests are authors Senator Phil Gramm and Donald Boudreaux, co-author of The Triumph of Economic Freedom, Debunking the 7 Great Myths of American Capitalism. Guys, thanks for coming by. And you know what? This topic is phenomenal because I think we get caught up in specific things. And the word capitalism, Senator Gramm, ends up being something that people hear as a dirty word when it's really an important word, in my opinion, capitalism.
The birth of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution basically took 1,000 years where we'd had no real economic growth, where people pretty much lived like their grandparents had lived. And in a short 100 years, dramatically changed the world. Capitalism, the Industrial Revolution, if you look at the facts, was a workers' revolution that dramatically increased wages, increased life expectancy, increased literacy, changed the world we live in.
Absolutely.
Created the world we live in.
I completely agree. And I have no idea. Donald, why do you see this as it's a bad, dirty word in a way, and the kind of myths, why you decided to write the book?
Bad, dirty word because a lot of intellectuals along the way have not liked capitalism. We can speculate as to why. One of the first intellectuals is, ironically, Karl Marx, who, the irony is, he acknowledged that capitalism was the greatest force in human history for expanding the output of the economy. The problem, according to Marx, is that expansion of the output came at the expense of the proletariat, at the expense of ordinary workers. And one of the things we show in our book, we're not the first ones to do this, but we summarized the research, is that the explosion in industrial output starting 200 years ago did not come at the expense of ordinary workers. They benefited too. It's true. Capitalists got, the successful ones got rich, but so too did ordinary families, ordinary workers in England and America.
That's so true. You've nailed it in so many ways. Senator, you learned this firsthand when you were a senator, correct? That how the other side saw things when it came to capitalism.
I learned that I was an economist before I went to Congress, so I already knew a lot about American and world economic history. But if you look at the facts and not the what I would call conventional wisdom on the Industrial Revolution, we're very blessed in that both Britain and then America started calculating economic data and making it public in the 19th century. So while all these writers are writing about the horrors of the Industrial Revolution, oh God, that bread should be so dear and flesh and blood so cheap, in the poem Song of the Shirt, at that very moment in 1849, the economic average growth rate in Great Britain, where the Industrial Revolution started, was growing at a rate that no person who had ever lived on this planet had ever seen their income go up by as much as it went up during that period.
Interesting. Donald, when we think about productivity now with AI coming into the picture, as I'm a huge proponent of AI, to the point it's made my business more productive, more profitable, and opportunities to scale much quicker than somebody else. What is your take about this new industrial revolution and my take in AI? I see this as one of the most unbelievable ones to really make us a more productive nation and world, and also give opportunities that probably weren't out there, that we might see the same thing.
I completely agree. The history is filled with concerns, worries about new technologies, destroying jobs, changing society. And of course, there are adjustment costs, there are adjustment challenges that people have to face. But we've done it. And when we're free to adjust, we do it very well. Go back to the introduction of fire and then the printing press and then all these wonderful, powerful machines in the Industrial Revolution. Not one of them is something that did not have lots of people complaining about warning about what it would, the horrors it was going to unleash on human society. But we're rich today because of those advancements
Right.
in the past, and AI is going to do the same thing.
AI is going to, and there's going to be people that don't propone it, and they're gonna say they're gonna be left behind. The dot-com era, in a certain way, same thing. And you just got to jump in. I guess the picks and axles of whatever series. I wonder who made more money in the Industrial Revolution, the people that are creating the picks and axes, or the other, or like the gold rush. And you just look at these specific times, and you have to say, this is great that we're in these economic times. Space travel next, all these opportunities. There's no time ever in this, I think, in this century, any century, where we're going to see such growth in such a quick time. And Senator, do you agree with me on that? In this, where we're seeing things going and where it could go in directions that people want to work hard, they want to roll up their sleeves like some other generations had, and say, this is an opportunity for me to really change my lifestyle forever because of this opportunity.
Obviously, anytime you have dramatic change, and artificial intelligence is almost certainly going to bring dramatic change, you're going to have what a famous economist, Joseph Schumpeter, called a wave of creative destruction. When the automobile came, if you owned a horse stable or you were selling saddles or wagons, you were hurt. But society as a whole was enriched. So artificial intelligence will bring change. There will be people who will see it as a threat to them. They will argue that it be controlled, that it be regulated. But all we know about the future is what we've seen in the past. And in the past, new technology has always benefited man as he's learned to deal with it. And there's no reason to think that's going to be different. And I think our chapter on the Industrial Revolution and then the chapter on progressive era regulation really bring home in hard facts the point that there were people who were losing from the Industrial Revolution. The landed gentry was seeing their labor go to the cities looking for opportunity and freedom, and they opposed it. And they basically either wrote or funded most of the Victorian era literature that talks about the terrible conditions in the Industrial Revolution. But in the end, the Industrial Revolution, people went to the city to find opportunity and freedom, and they found both.
They totally did. Yeah. That's so true. And they found both. So it's interesting, Donald. I guess the surprise is highlighting these different chapters where capitalism has really helped get the economy back in order again in so many ways. And the people who don't believe in a capitalist society is going to see a death, right? Because there's never going to be the word growth. I think capitalism means growth in so many aspects.
It
Donald.
certainly means innovation is essential to the whole capitalist logic. The senator mentioned creative destruction a moment ago, and that's just the inherent in this dynamic entrepreneurial capitalist society of which we are fortunate to be a part. Every new advance creates new opportunities. It exposes people to possibilities that before were unimaginable. And as long as we're free to pursue those possibilities with our own money and voluntarily exchanging with other people, the history's overwhelmingly clear that the standard of living of nearly everyone, rich and especially the poor and the middle classes, rise as a result of this competitive entrepreneurial dynamic process.
And I think, Senator Graham, it's if we look at sports, look at competitive environments, people thrive on watching competition, yet we don't want our economy to be competitive.
Yeah.
Look, the people who occupy the penthouse would like to freeze things in place. You got to remember the landed gentry stood to lose from the Industrial Revolution. And as people moved to the cities and the political power structure changed, the corn laws in Britain, which had protected the landed gentry and given them artificially high prices for feed grains, were repealed. Now, it increased the living standards of working people dramatically, but the landed gentry lost.
Yeah.
And I think that is often a hidden factor. There's sort of two things at work here. One, the people who believe they're going to lose from the new changes. And secondly, the people who don't understand the new changes. When Christmas Carol, the famous book about Ebenezer Scrooge, was written, the author of that book never envisioned, he was looking back at 1,000 years of economic stagnation, and he never envisioned how poor people could ever be better off unless rich people like Ebenezer Scrooge shared his wealth with them. But what Ebenezer Scrooge was doing, as Warren Buffett is doing in America today, is that by accumulating wealth and investing, the Ebenezer Scrooges of Great Britain built the railroads, the factories, the steamships that changed the world. And so they did more for working people by engaging in investment and the profit motive and making capitalism work than taking their money and giving it away could have ever done.
Yeah. And creating something new,
yeah,
creating a new innovation, and that's the exciting time. And if you stay the course and study the most famous people in the world, you got to stay the course and you got to keep going in so many ways. Donald, what was the biggest surprise you think that the readers will get out of this, or myth that they're going to say, oh my gosh, I didn't know this?
It probably depends on the reader. A good candidate is the Great Depression. It's commonplace in America, of course, to accuse the Great Depression of exposing the weaknesses of capitalism that allegedly were gotten rid of only through the New Deal. But if you look at the origins of the Great Depression, both how it started and why it lasted as long and as deeply as it did, what you'll find all along the way is that it had nothing to do with any market imperfection. It was all the result of government missteps throughout the entire decade of the 1930s. So that's one. Another is, Senator Graham already mentioned it, it's a myth to believe that in America in the late 19th century, poor and middle class people were being ground under the heel of the boots of people like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. Completely wrong. Ordinary people were becoming richer. That progressive era regulation was imposed to protect domestic producers from competition, not to protect consumers and workers from the advances in the economy that were then occurring.
Okay. Now I have a final question for both of you guys, and this is involving one of my co-hosts that came up with this question, and I love it, and I always will coin it because he's become very busy. It's, again, everyone's hustling now as business owners with the changes. Is the economy growing, or it's not growing? And I'll ask that last question after this final question that he always asks. So I'm going to go first with Senator Graham, then with Donald. So, Senator, tell me, what was the most important thing in life you've ever learned?
That hard work pays off, that the system is competitive, and you can go a long way with a little more effort. That this would be wonderful to be born beautiful and rich and brilliant, but if you're not any of those things in America, if you're willing to take your God-given talents and put them to their highest and best use, you can go a long way in this country.
How about you, Donald?
That modern society, the society generally, the economy more specifically, is vastly more complex and nuanced than most people think. It's an incredibly complex mechanism or organism that's constantly changing. And people talk about it in simplistic terms, and that gives people the mistaken impression that government can easily intervene to tweak it here and tweak it over there and improve it. And they can't, because it's way too complex for the human mind to fully grasp.
Great point. Now, guys, let's go to the economy today. Now, as the state of May 20th, do you feel that Donald Trump's tariffs have been a good idea or a bad idea for the economy? First, you, Donald.
First,
Well,
me? Yeah.
that's really,
Unambiguously bad idea.
Bad?
they've been a bad idea. They drive up prices. They impede business efficiency. They reduce growth. And this has all been tested very recently by nobody other than Donald Trump. When he put his original tariffs into place in the first term, he set objectives, and his tariffs didn't achieve any of those objectives. The trade deficit went up, not down. Industrial production went down, not up. Economic growth went down, not up, or the rate of economic growth. And the number of people working in manufacturing relative to total employment declined. So tariffs have never worked. They didn't work for President Trump the first time, and they're not going to work now. And the sooner that we can negotiate trade agreements and back out of these tariffs, the better off we're going to be.
Fully
And
agree.
you said bad news too, Donald. What if it leads to all the negotiations of trade? Was it worth it even if we can negotiate all these trade deals?
Unfortunately, what he's trying to negotiate toward is something that we basically don't want or is impossible. He believes that trade deficits with individual countries are something to be gotten rid of. They are economically meaningless. And so he has a goal that has no economic meaning. And so, in pursuit of an economically meaningless goal, he's inflicting damage on the American economy that's very difficult to reverse the longer it goes on.
And we have a chapter on this in the book.
Yeah.
The myth being that trade in the post-war period hollowed out American manufacturing. Totally false.
Yeah. Quite the opposite happened. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So we really have to look at things as a global society, not in a way to have the best trade, is to look at globally every business versus just one country.
Yeah, look, when people complain, is the current administration, and lots of people do, complain about the trade deficit is another name for a capital inflow, a net capital inflow into America. Why we Americans should be upset that foreigners are so eager to invest in our economy, and why we should worry about more capital coming in, more tools, more funding for research and development and entrepreneurial startups. This is a complete mystery to me. We should applaud the willingness of global investors to invest their hard-earned money in our economy rather than trying to bargain them away from doing so.
Okay. This is interesting. You're hearing this, and this is where you guys definitely need to pick up the book. Best place to go, senators, where can we go to buy the book? Go put it up there again.
You can go on Amazon.
Yeah.
If any bookseller on the internet will have the book. And we want you to read it. Buying it is great, but reading it is more important. And I think what you'll find is that the country you live in is a greater country than you even realize.
Yeah.
America works, and it's reassuring. It overcomes not only the disease, that is the challenges we face day to day in earning a living and progressing, but it overcomes the absurd prescription of the doctor, things like Trump's trade policy. We will survive this, and prosperity will go on. Now, we could be prosperous sooner and more prosperous with good policy.
And that's why, honestly, if it wasn't for that I said the most biggest opportunity for everyone with when you talk about AI, robotics, with robots coming out soon, and then the space, if we didn't have those opportunities of technological advances and did this, it would be even far worse. Yeah. It's really the fact of adding those three components that's keeping this economy going. If we didn't have those areas of economic growth, that's AI, robotics, and in the tech and SaaS, and the last thing is space. The advancements that are happening now we probably would be in trouble a lot worse
The
because
foundation for all of that is free markets,
Exactly.
entrepreneurial
So,
markets.
including space, it's
Yeah.
when we started to let private entrepreneurs have control the direction of the space program that things really came back strong.
Oh, 100%.
Freedom works. That's the point. Freedom works. Whether it's trade and letting people buy the best and cheapest goods, or whether it's running a business, you let the people who've got skin in the game make the decisions, not some government thousands of miles away who knows not beans about their business.
Exactly. They couldn't run a business.
Yeah.
So there you go. There you go. Well, appreciate it, guys. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks for having us, Neil.
All right. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.